Okay, everybody, so welcome back. And today we're finishing up our discussion dealing with World War One by talking about the Russian Revolution. All right, so this is basically, the buildup and reasons for Russia leaving World War One because, they were occupying a lot of Germany's time for, the first like 3 years of the war. So this is how Russia got out and basically the creation of the Soviet Union, the world's first like socialist slash communist nation. All right, now let's go ahead and get into it. Now, the 1800s in Russia, we're seeing there on the map, green, it's the biggest country of all time, like singular nation. It is multi-ethnic and multicultural. So we have many ethnic groups of people. You have different Middle Eastern descended people, Asian peoples, and Slavic peoples, Rus peoples, and you have just the different cultures within these different ethnic groups. And it's still very, very different from one area to another. Over 100 different languages are spoken in Russia at this time, and there's all kinds of different faiths. You've got Orthodox faith, you've got different Asian faiths, you've got Islam being practiced in the southern regions here, like north of Pakistan, Iran, Iraq, all in this area. Right? The government of Russia during this time is autocratic, meaning that they are ruled by a singular person, kind of like an absolute monarch. This really being called the Tsar, which is descended from the word Caesar, Caesar, Tsar, which translates to like emperor or monarch or king. Now, this right here is the last Tsar of Russia. This is Tsar Nicholas II. He is going to inherit a kingdom that is in trouble. There's a lot of social and political problems. He was not like fully prepared to rule when he took over the czarship. And yeah, it's definitely going to prove very poorly for him and his family, uh, which is the Romanov family. There was, of course, Tsar Nicholas II, the Tsarina, his wife, Alexandra, and they had four daughters, Olga, Tatiana, Maria, and Anastasia, and one son, Alexei. The pronunciation of that is Alexei, not Alexis. All right, now, little something to know about Prince Alexei. He suffered a disease that is called hemophilia, which is basically your blood, like if you get a cut, does not clot. It's very difficult to stop the bleeding. So, yeah, he was he wasn't allowed to do a whole lot of things because they had a major fear of him hurting himself and bleeding out. And this disease would be kept from the public because they didn't want the public to like worry or go crazy over the fact that there is a sickly like heir to the throne. So something that the royal family is going to do, in at least it's a secret at first, they're going to hire a healer. His name is Rasputin. He is a self-proclaimed monk. He was never like traditionally trained to be a monk. He called himself a healer, and he basically met with the Tsar and the Tsarina, and after a discussion, they basically hired him to heal their son. He was Rasputin was not what he appeared to be, and he would actually, at least a lot of the rumors go that he would have this influence over the royal family and like running the government secretly, like influencing their decisions. Uh, Not a super amount of credit to that, but there is some. Like maybe he did, throw some influence here and there, but not all the time. Uh, some things to know about Rasputin. He was this dirty, hardly ever bathed guy who was a big time womanizer, and he was an all around disgusting guy. Let's look at it that way. And now he is basically like the personal healer and confidant of members of the royal family, like the Tsarina, their daughters, a little bit with the Tsar. And he would basically be behind the scenes for some major events that lead up to the fall of Russia. Now, one of these big events being the Russo-Japanese War, and this is when Russia and Japan fight over the territory of Manchuria. This is a territory that we have talked about before. It is a heavily rich industrial slash like natural resource area in northeastern China. You can see on the map here it's highlighted, and it's just north of Korea, the Korean Peninsula, on the border with Russia. And the Russian Navy and the Japanese Navy, they are going to go at it. And two-thirds of the Russian fleet is just obliterated. And it is just a humongous defeat for Russia. So Tsar Nicholas II completely humiliated. They lose that war. That's a big hit. Then we get the 1905 Bloody Sunday, when there is a peaceful march of workers that turns violent, and they're protesting over food shortages and fuel shortages. Soldiers who are put into the area to calm and disperse the crowd, they end up firing into the crowd. The press is going to say about 100 people were killed and a lot of people were wounded. The protesters, the people there who got shot at, they're going to claim close to 1,000 people died. So this is yet another hit that the Tsar is taking. And then we're going to have this to try and smooth things over. The October Manifesto of 1905, where Tsar Nicholas II is going to promise some reforms. There's going to be a constitution written up. More civil rights and liberties are going to be given to the people. And there's going to now be a Duma, or a legislation, like a Congress type body in the government now. But meanwhile, Rasputin is still like spinning his webs, shall we say. He's going to continue to influence Tsar and the Tsarina. He's going to claim he has cured their son's hemophilia, which just automatically raises him in their esteem. And people in the inner circle who know Rasputin and are seeing the influence that he's starting to have over the royal family, they are getting more and more skeptical. They don't trust him. So they're going to do something about it. Now, I told you that Rasputin was a womanizer. There was a religious movement that would appear every so often in different religions, and during this time, the late 1800s into the early 1900s, there was a small movement, and Rasputin was a big practitioner in this, where people would be closer to God when they're in sexual ecstasy. So he would have basically these, there's really not a subtle way of putting it, these religious sex parties where he would be with women of the royal court. And so the nobility, knowing of Rasputin and his practices, they basically lured him to a noble's house with the promise of introducing him to the guy's new young wife, which he was all too ready to jump at that chance. So while they're waiting for her to quote unquote arrive, they are sitting around eating and drinking, and Rasputin consumes these cakes that are laced with poison. They don't do anything to him. And when you investigate into it a little bit, is because when they were baked, the poison got cooked out of it, essentially. Kind of like if you cook with wine in food, the alcohol burns out. The poison got burned out of the cakes when they were being cooked. So they saw that that didn't work. They tried poisoning him with in his drinks. That didn't work. He consumed enough to kill like 3 or 4 men of like cyanide, which is supposed to be a very deadly poison. Apparently, it had expired and didn't do anything. So then they shot him at least twice, and they beat him with clubs, and then they rolled him up in a rug and threw him into an icy river. When his body was eventually found, he had apparently started to claw his way out of the carpet, and he froze to death in the water. And when they did an autopsy, where they cut him open and take a look on the inside, apparently there was water in his lungs. So yeah, he was alive when he was thrown into the river. And yeah, so the legend was that like he was this like devil, like in league with the devil type person who was like with superhuman abilities but they were able to overcome him and kill him. And so that's like how the legend of like the evil Rasputin was born. Now, during all of this time, Rasputin is around and all, there's starting to be a new movement taking place and starting to gain traction in the early 1900s. This idea of socialism and communism. Now, socialism, the belief that, production, the capital like money, the land, raw materials, factories are owned and controlled by, the government, not individuals. And also communism, where society has no classes and no private property. The government owns everything and gives equal amounts of everything to everyone. This is starting to be very appealing to the working class of Russia. And that's going to lead to what is called the Bolshevik Revolution, Bolshevik movement, however you want to say it. It's the Bolsheviks. Now, they are the working class. They want to lead a revolution and seize control of Russia. They're led by Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov, or Vladimir Lenin. The goal is to create a socialist state with no social classes and no private property. So this is really going to get going in 1917 with the March Revolution, where there are food riots in St. Petersburg. Tsar Nicholas is going to shut down the Duma. He gets rid of it. The Tsar is going to order troops to suppress all of the craziness going on. And neither one of these groups are going to obey the Tsar. The Duma stays, and the troops end up joining the revolution. That's pretty bad. So now everybody's just up in arms. It's all just chaos going on. So by March of 1917, Tsar Nicholas II abdicates or gives up the throne of Russia. His family is evacuated by August, and by March, but in March of 1917, Russia becomes a republic with a provisional government being established. So the Duma is in charge essentially. And then the Lenin and the Bolsheviks are going to overthrow that provisional government by November, so about 6 months later, and they are going to claim absolute power under Lenin. Now, a socialist state based on the ideas of Karl Marx and Lenin is going to take place. Land is going to be redistributed to the peasants, so equal plots of land to everyone essentially, to all families. An end to private ownership of property. It's all government land that you are allowed to live on and work. The workers, they are basically gaining equality to the people who used to lord over them. And the Bolsheviks are going to be renamed the Communist Party in 1918. And from 1918 to 1920, there's going to be a civil war where you have the Reds, or the Communists, versus the Whites, or Royalist, people who wanted to put the Tsar back in power. So this is going to go on for a little while. But during all this time, what's happening to the Romanovs? A very tragic story happens to them, and we're going to get into it. So they are imprisoned in what is called the Epitiev House, and they are give up They have to give up all the luxuries, all the jewels that they have, the fine clothing, all of that. They basically are living like a lower middle class type life at this house. And they think that they're going to be rescued. uh, Nicholas II, his cousin is King George of England, the King of England. And like they were good friends, they're cousins, they look like they could have been twin brothers. But were the Romanovs going to be rescued? Sadly, not so much. July 17th, 1918, 2:33 in the morning, they are roughly awakened in the middle of the night. The royal family, their doctor, and 3 servants are brought down to the basement of the Ipatiev house, and they are assassinated under the orders from Vladimir Lenin. Now, it says here they were shot. That's only partially true. The soldiers who had everyone lined up in the wall, this wall to be exact, uh, they're all meant to basically just shoot the person in front of them. But a lot of these soldiers, wanting to be the person who killed the Tsar, when they're given the order to fire, a bunch of them turn their guns onto the Tsar and they open fire into him. He gets riddled with bullets, and then they just start firing blindly into the everyone else, not killing everyone. So then, like some of the children and some of the servants, they had to finish them off by stabbing them to death. Brutal, brutal murder. And they were buried in shallow graves outside the house in 2 different locations. The Romanov family's bodies were found and uncovered found in 1991, but 2 bodies were missing from this first gravesite because they only thought there was one gravesite. One of the daughters, either Anastasia or Maria, they weren't sure which one, but there had been rumors for decades that Anastasia had escaped, and the body of Prince Alexei was missing as well. So that only helped feed the idea that maybe one of that Anastasia had escaped. But yeah, that didn't exactly go well. But 1998, they were given a proper burial with all the royal like ceremony they were deserving of as the last royal family of Russia. And in 2007, 2 more bodies were found not far from the original burial site. Now, the remains, they were analyzed, and it was discovered that through DNA testing, they were the remains of Alexei and Anastasia. So, yes, the entire family was wiped out in 1917. And yeah, very tragic what happened to that royal family. But on the bright side, they were ordained as saints in the Russian Orthodox Church in the year 2000, and they are considered martyrs in Russia. So in death, they were given some proper treatment after the fact. Now, Lenin and the Communist Party, they are going to gain absolute power in 1918. They're going to defeat the Royalists in 1920 and establish a socialist state. No private property and no social classes is the name of the game. Now, the state takes control of the economy. They are in charge of everything. All businesses, all agriculture, all of it. The people are going to work for the good of the whole. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, for anyone who likes the Star Trek reference. Now, what they have to do is when crops are harvested, they are turned over to the state, and peasants would be paid in crops, not money. But this is a very inefficient system, so everything's being collected into one location essentially to then be redistributed evenly to everybody. But millions of people are going to starve while this is all happening because it's happening so slowly. So yeah, they were not be able to redistribute the food in a fast enough pace, so you're having a lot of people die from starvation. A lot of people are just starving, and it's just gonna be a problem that happens a lot. Now, the Communist Russia is going to take on the name the Soviet Union, or the USSR, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. And they're going to adopt a constitution based on dictatorship as the rule. And so, yeah, like one person's in charge. He might have like a council that does what he says, and that's about it. So, yeah, it's still like autocratic, but just under a different guideline. Now, Lenin is going to die in 1924. An elaborate tomb is built. He's put in a glass coffin so that people can, basically worship him and, pay their respects to him all the time. This is a very high honor that was given to him, obviously, because he is the father of, communist Russia. But with the death of Lenin, who's in charge now, the two lead guys are Leon Trotsky and Joseph Stalin. So which of them is going to take over? Trotsky would have been the less psychotic person to take over, but Stalin, being the crazier of the two, is going to get what he wants. So he's going to figure out a way to get people who support him into top jobs in the government. He's going to spread a lot of false rumors about Trotsky, and he's going to gain control. He's going to threaten Trotsky. He's going to basically exile him in 1929, and he's going to send people after him to kill him. So Trotsky is going to be murdered in Frida Kahlo, the famous Mexican artist, in her house in 1940. He had people going after Trotsky for 11 years trying to track him down and kill him. Yeah. If you were on Stalin's list of to be killed, there was like a 95 to 99% chance that it was going to happen at some point. All right. Stalin in 1928, he's got his power solidified essentially at this time. He is going to put in place what is called the 5-year plan, where he's going to try and industrialize the Soviet Union. He wants to build heavy industry, basically a ton of factories, improve transportation, so more trains and roads, more boat traffic, going to increase farming output by mechanizing farming practices, more tractors, more machinery to harvest stuff instead of doing it by hand. And the 5-year plan actually is going to last longer than 5 years. Mostly it is, 11 years. And they're going to get large factories, power plants, a lot of industrialization is going to happen, more railroads are being built, which is all good. He accomplished that part, but the standard of living is going to remain very poor. And yeah, food distribution never really got fixed very well. So some of the plan was accomplished, some of it was not. And it took over twice the amount of time that was, planned out. All right, 1934, we get what is called the Great Purge, where this is essentially Stalin's reign of terror. Think back to the French Revolution. 4 million people are going to be persecuted against, 800,000 of them are going to be executed. Basically, anybody who stood against or disagreed with him being in charge and the policies he was putting in place, anyone who was a threat or he saw as a threat to his power, get rid of them. They were dead, essentially, or they were put in work camps in Siberia where they were essentially slaves for the rest of their lives if they didn't die. So, yeah, a lot of important leader roles would then be opened up, and he would put people who were less capable in those roles, which will show in the kind of bad leadership that we see in the Soviet Union during World War II. Like a lot of top good generals were killed off in the purge. So less capable leaders for the military were now in place. All right, Stalin's going to outlaw religion. So churches of any kind, they're gone. There is no official policy on religion except atheism. Religious leaders, they're going to be persecuted, and people, they had to become atheist overnight. They could not openly practice their religions. So if they did, it was basically in the middle of the night in the privacy of a dark room at their house. A lot of censorship. So yeah, the government controlled everything. The books people read, the music they listened to, the complete opposite of freedom. You had no rights at all under this socialist communist type of government. They literally controlled everything. They told you what jobs you could do. They told you what you could read, what you could write, what you could eat, where you could sleep at night. They told you where to live, all of it. But there were a couple benefits. Free education for everyone. Uh, though you could not choose the job that you would then go to school for. You were just told, like, all right, you seem to thrive going in this direction. This is what you're going to be. Deal with it. Free medical care, but that is a good thing. But it was basically you take your ticket, wait for them to call your name so you could go see a doctor. Doesn't matter if you had a minor cold or if you had been stabbed. You wait your turn. Women would also gain equality under the law during this communism period. Uh, so that's a good point right there, a good one. All right. So the dictatorship in Russia, the Soviet Union, is like a perfect example of totalitarianism. This is basically total control over the lives of the people. And the first big example is the Soviet Union, and the second example is with fascism in Italy. We will be getting more into that in a later lesson when we are talking about the rise of the dictators before World War II. All right, that is where we're going to end today. Be sure to study for your upcoming quiz. All right, talk to you later.